Welcome to Talent Buzz, where I talk about talent acquisition with fast-growing SaaS companies. And today I'm joined by Cooper Miller, Head of Tech Recruitments in EMEA from Uber. And we are discussing how to build an engineering site, how to recruit people there, how to build a great culture, and a lot of more stuff around that one. And let's start today's episode to understand how Uber is organized, where their headquarters is, why they have different tech hubs around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Uber's headquarters, like a lot of large tech companies, is still in San Francisco, California. We have engineering sites around the US and Canada as well, and a reasonable remote presence there. And then you have your regional tech hubs as well. So those include in EMEA that I oversee Sofia, Bulgaria, Amsterdam in the Netherlands, Aarhus, Denmark, and then moving into LATAM, you have Sao Paulo, and we have 2 sites in India as well. That's our kind of overall global engineering presence.
Yeah. And is your kind of, if we look at not tech side, but then commercial sites, like is basically all of your commercial people in the US, or do you have like commercial sites kind of combined with your tech hubs as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, oftentimes you'll see, in Amsterdam, it's our headquarters for EMEA from a commercial standpoint as well. So we have, I think, just over 1,000 employees sitting here in Amsterdam. Only around 200, 300 of them are what we classify as tech. And Uber is like a hyper local business, right? So even we have offices of 2, 3, 4, 5 people in most of the cities or regions that we operate in. So we're very distributed from a commercial standpoint. We try to be a little bit more centralized from a tech standpoint.
Yeah, makes sense. But maybe the kind of first interesting topic for the discussion could be culture. So kind of when you have different sites, there are kind of different cultures, and then there's kind of the HQ culture, how the sites are different from that one and so forth. So how do you think, like if you think your European hubs, you have 3 over there, like how the cultures are different, and like how do you kind of need to manage a culture when recruiting people and so forth?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question because a company's culture is not going to be the same in every single location that you go to. Each is going to have its own nuance and its own brand. And in talent acquisition, we have a very hands-on role in creating that. I think when you look at building successful distributed engineering sites, you have to be able to take in a little bit of both. You have to bring in that global culture around what are the company's cultural values, tie into those, make sure that the type of talent that you are recruiting is consistent with the global bar. But when you're building the site is also going to have its own inherent local culture. That could be due to cultural nuance in the local community. It could be local rituals that the team performs. Maybe in some of our sites we have folks that are very into the outdoors, and so the whole team goes doing CrossFit or running in the woods or what have you. And so it's important to anchor into the global side, but still let there be space for a local culture to develop in each of those.
Interesting. And if you look at your kind of European tech hubs, where are they located exactly?
European tech hubs. We have Sofia, Bulgaria, probably around 75 folks there. Aarhus, Denmark, just broke 100 recently. And then Amsterdam with around 250.
Yeah. And now comes kind of a guess from me, but if I think about like what I know about kind of working culture and so forth, like I imagine that Denmark, Amsterdam, they are quite similar to the kind of US culture, the HQ culture. But then like Bulgaria would be maybe that there would be even bigger difference. Is my guess completely wrong, or like have you seen some kind of differences there?
I would say that you are correct in the analysis of Bulgaria. Reason being, Bulgaria is an interesting talent market. It's incredibly strong from an engineering perspective, and it's getting stronger every year with how great the universities are there. However, Bulgaria is a market that poses significant limitations from an immigration standpoint. And as a result, the population of our Bulgarian office is largely Bulgarian, a couple
Mm,
exceptions, but for the most part, Bulgarian. Um, and so that leads to kind of the cultural nuance of Bulgaria being integrated very closely into the site. Um, then you look at Aarhus and the Netherlands, immigration policy there quite open,
mm,
quite easy in the grand scheme of things to import talent into these offices. And so there you get a much more international makeup of the folks that are present. I would say, Aarhus is still a large portion Danish, but Amsterdam actually, the actual Dutch nationals in that office would make up a minority. So in that sense, it's more of a multicultural, a diverse site as far as nationalities go in Amsterdam. So I think they each have their own unique aspect, and it's not always about the talent market that's there around the office. It's about the global talent market and the ability for talent acquisition to tap into that.
yeah, yeah. And kind of relocations has been a big part of your kind of talent acquisition strategy. So can you share a bit about that one? Because I think there are still like a lot of companies who are not doing that one at all. So like why you are doing that one? What's the main reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like relocations. I mean, for me, like I relocated to come to Amsterdam for the role. So this is my personal story specifically. I think Uber, we're fortunate enough here to be able to search the entire globe for the absolute best talent that's out there. Sure, there is a cost to visa sponsorship. There is a cost to relocation. But for us, from the very beginning, that's been a cost that we have, said this is the cost of doing business. This is the cost of getting the very best. And so it's not something that is poured over, analyzed when we're looking at talent. I think, but if you say, hey, we're going to relocate a large percentage of our hires into our site, the way that you set up candidate experience is very different from the way you do it if you were just recruiting people in the city that your site was based. So, for example, you are still, just as you would in a normal recruiting process, closing on the role. What's the role going to involve? What's the team this person is going to be joining? But you're also closing on your city. You're closing on your town. You're closing on the lifestyle that this individual might experience were they to move here. And a lot of times they're more senior hires. What's their family going to experience? If they're
Mm,
moving to the Netherlands, they're going to have to learn Dutch? Are their children going to need to learn Dutch? And what is that going to be like for them? So our recruiters have to be experts not just on the tech stack that we have, but what is the experience for enrolling your kids in kindergarten when you arrive, right? That's is something that maybe is completely out of sight, out of mind to other recruiters, but for my team, we spend a lot of time on that. So uh, whether that is some ways that we can kind of bring this into our actual recruiting process is we can set up calls with candidates and folks who have maybe immigrated from similar locations to tell them what their story was like. We can do things on our careers page to demystify the experience, to give more context of even just some pictures of the office sometimes make people feel at home.
mm.
So when your candidate pool is people that are relocating, the candidate experience can be changed. You can go about it in a different way to make sure that you're successful when you get to the end question, which is, hey, would you like to uproot your life and move here and be part of this organization?
Very interesting. And I think that I think a lot of companies are not thinking about relocation from that perspective. Like people are thinking about visas or work permits and stuff like that. But I think that's actually like way bigger for kind of people changing their lives. And I think, as you mentioned, like it's important that recruiters can talk about those things. Do you have something like 101 guide for moving to Amsterdam? You have a PDF file you can
Yeah,
share for
yeah.
people joining.
Oh, I mean, in my like 5.5 years at Uber, I think that task has been completed like numerous times. There's
Yeah.
various iterations of that have changed over the years, but yeah, like we have that playbook. It's a slide deck. We send it out. Here's the things you need to know, and then the candidate experience doesn't stop when the person signs the offer.
Of
We
course.
have to follow them through the immigration process. It doesn't stop when they start. We need to make sure that we might even send a map that has all of our favorite restaurants on it, so that their first week they're not only exploring this new job, they're not just getting a new laptop, they're getting a new apartment, they're getting a new group of friends. Like this is our experience goes a little bit further than it would if someone was just crossing the street to join the company.
Interesting. But what do you think? Like, and thinking about like typical recruitment process, there is typically like two parts. There is the kind of validation of candidate, and then there's kind of selling of the company. And now we're talking about kind of selling of the company, like how you are kind of selling Uber, but not in this case Uber, but the country, like the country that the person is coming. But are you as a recruiter, so you are for sure validating the person kind of from a job perspective, like is this the right person for the role? But are you actually also validating if this country is the right country for the person? Like, have you ever had that situation where actually you feel like it would be a right person, a right skill set for your company, and they actually feel, for example, that Amsterdam would be a right place for you, but then you feel like they wouldn't enjoy Amsterdam? Like, have you ever come across like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like, almost all of my team is based here in Amsterdam, so we live that experience. It's a little bit harder for us in Aarhus because we don't live up there, but it isn't our place to tell someone whether or not they should continue in the process because of whether or not they'd fit in the city. But it is our place to absolutely educate them on everything and point out the good and the bad. The challenges that come with relocation, right? Like, and make sure that they're comfortable with this. And that has to start from the initial call, especially if we're reaching out to passive candidates. I reach out to you and you live in, who knows? I mean, we have a large Brazilian contingent. You live in Sao Paulo, and I say, hey, you want to move to Amsterdam? They might say, wow, I've always wanted to work for Uber. I'd love to go through the process. And as a recruiter, you're excited. You have the candidate interested. Let's go. Let's get them interviewed. Let's screen them. Oh, they passed the interview. So exciting. And then you get to the closing call and they say, oh, well, I've got, my wife here, my husband here. Our kids are about to start school, and now your entire process is unraveling before your eyes, right? So this piece of the close starts from the very beginning, where we're challenging people on their interest and validating to make sure that they are serious about this, because otherwise we're wasting precious resources on this exercise.
And I think, would you say that there is a big difference regarding the kind of source of the candidates? So whether you have found them through LinkedIn or some other platform and kind of doing outreach for them, versus that they have like send an application through your career site for a role open in, let's say, Amsterdam?
Sure. I think that variance is quite location specific. So, I mean, just for the sake of argument, let's take Aarhus, Denmark, and Amsterdam, Netherlands. So in Amsterdam, we get massive amounts of inbound applications, very high quality inbound applications from all over the world. Amsterdam is a widely known city, and it's a relatively, if you ask the general person, list the places you'd be interested in relocating in Europe, Amsterdam would probably be up there. But Aarhus is not the case. That's not on people's radar when they're thinking about, where should I move my family? Where should I move myself, start my new career? So when it comes to Aarhus, that first call is maybe us not disqualifying them from the location, but explaining to them why this should be in consideration, and why that this could be a fit for them. And starting from, I know nothing about this location, to I'm ready to move my life there. That's a very long journey to move. But your question kind of brings up another topic, which I think is interesting, and that is the people who apply to Amsterdam, for example, and are coming from somewhere else. They're not just considering Amsterdam quite frequently. Your competitors, the other offers that they're getting are not just Amsterdam-based offers. In our experience, if they have an offer from Uber and they're moving from, say their home country for the first time, they probably have an offer from Meta in London. They probably have an offer from Google in Zurich. Maybe they even have an offer from, I don't know, Shopify in Canada. They're considering leaving their home country. They're not considering moving to a specific place. And so they're open to all these options. So now we have to be selling the location against other locations, in addition to selling the company against other companies. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes. Do you have any? I think you most likely don't have kind of exact data on that one, but maybe kind of your own personal feeling. Like, how's the kind of percentages over there? And what I mean by that is like, is it 90% of selling the company against other companies and 10% of selling the place against other places, or 50% and 50%, or what would you say?
Well, it varies candidate to candidate. Just by, let's take a normal close where you just have your candidate that lives across the street from the office and you're trying to convince them to join your company.
Mm-hmm.
You have to decide what percentage of your time to sell your compensation package. You have to decide what percentage of the time to sell the company culture, what percentage of the time to sell the career advancement opportunities. Just in this case, you have to change that mix up to incorporate additional variables of location, company, family, these types of things. So it's all about discovery in the initial calls, right? You're asking open-ended questions. You're understanding the full situation so that you can provide the information that person needs to make an educated decision about their next move.
That's good. Good stuff. Good stuff. I need to write that one down for me, because I've been like a lot of thinking about like how to sell the company, how to make sure you're not overselling, how to make sure that is super relevant for the candidate. So good stuff. Hey, then kind of interesting topic, aligning the company strategy with the kind of site strategy. So can you share a bit like how you are doing that one? And for example, if we think like once again, the headquarters in the US, then kind of multiple tech hubs around the country, like are all the tech hubs working basically around the same strategy? Does all the tech hubs have their own meaning, like why that particular tech hub is there? Like, for example, some part of the product or some new business areas, or like how do you align the strategy and the tech hubs?
Sure. And, I think this is what makes tech and eng recruiting different from other sites. So let's say like if we were doing sales recruiting, for example, and Uber was launching in Germany, it would be plausible that we would need to hire a bunch of German speaking sales representatives, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's naturally necessary. But if we're going to launch Uber in Germany, we also need to create a payment integrations with local payers. Those engineers don't need to be German. They don't need to be in Germany. They don't need to even be in Europe. They could be anywhere. So my point being, when we're building engineering sites, at least at Uber, it's not because we have a specific feature to that region, a specific product to that region. We're building that site there because we believe that there's some reason that there's a competitive advantage to building a tech hub in that site. And a lot of that is actually fed from talent acquisition. That's talent intelligence. That's, factors like what's the local talent population? What's the cost of labor? What's the level of English proficiency? What's the percentage diversity in the talent pool? Mm-hmm. So I think like initially when you're making that decision, you make a kind of genesis story of a charter based off of talent intelligence. But then once you say, okay, this is the location we want to build here, then you decide, okay, what kind of products do you want to build in this location? And you generally start, anytime a charter starts, it starts with a group of individuals supporting features from a larger team somewhere else. And that's how you bootstrap. And that's tough work for the first couple engineers because they're working across different time zones. They don't have total ownership of things. But then as you grow that team, they start to own this whole component. And then you grow it further. And now they're an actual charter. They say, we do this specific type of work and we own all of it. So for us in Amsterdam, that's the money experience. So if you've uploaded your credit card to Uber, or you're an Uber earner and you get paid out after doing your trips for the day, that engineering work was all done in Amsterdam because we own money for the entire globe. And as a result, anything that has to do with money, we build it here. And if anybody wants to build anything that has to do with money somewhere else, they better have a very good reason as to why they want to do that, because that's our domain, that's our space. Mm-hmm. And that's super important for a distributed charter, because historically, organizations have opened up a charter in, say, India or Amsterdam or anywhere that's lower cost than the US and said, all right, let's hire some engineers because they're cheap. Let's send them all the work that our people in the States don't want to do.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible way to build an engineering culture. That's a great way to have attrition. It's a mess. So when you're building that site, it needs to be deliberate. It needs to be specific. This is what we are going to own, and this is what we're not going to own. So that when you're selling that from a talent acquisition perspective, you're telling the engineer, this is why we're here. We have a purpose, and this is what you're going to be working on. And this is our vision for the next 2, 3, 4 years as we continue to expand.
And I can imagine that really helps when kind of selling the company, because I feel like there is still like a lot of companies struggling with kind of sharing the story for candidates, like what they are doing, why they are there as a company, why they are hiring that person, and so forth. So really, really good tip there.
Well, it's a pain point, right, for a lot of engineers that are in sites like this today, in where the HQ is somewhere else. You'll talk to them and you say, my product manager sits in California, or all my code reviews take place in New York, or I don't have any ownership. And that's such a common theme that you hear from distributed sites. That is something that we're very, very deliberate about eliminating.
Interesting. One thing that kind of has happened within Uber as well is like you've been growing super rapidly. And I think one thing comes to hiring when you are hiring a lot of people, and it's called batch pool interviews. And I think this might be actually a new term for a lot of people. Like if you are not hired in volumes, this is a new term. So can you share what batch pool interviews mean exactly?
Yeah, so let's see. How do we state this simply? If we want to hire, let's start with the opposite. We have 3 hiring managers, and they each want to go hire an engineer. What do? That hiring manager builds a panel from the people on their team, and you send each engineering manager candidates, and they interview them based off their specific requirements, and then they make a hiring decision each independently. Now, if you scale that up and say, I need to hire 100 engineers this year, or in 6 months, for example, what's the most efficient way to do it? It's not to distribute the work across 15 different teams and have them each do their own thing. The most efficient way to do it is to batch it or pool it, bring it together in a single unified funnel. Now, it makes for harmony from a recruiting perspective, but it's a very difficult thing to sell to a business, to an engineering organization, if they haven't done it before. So there's some must-haves that you need if you're going to get into this. One, you need consistency in the types of profiles that you're hiring. Uber does a very good job of this. So a backend engineer at Uber is pretty much, from a profile perspective, the same as 75% of other backend engineers at Uber. No matter if they're working on this piece of the stack or this particular team, platform, product, what have you. Generally, the job requirements are consistent to a large degree. Additionally, you have to have interview calibration. You have to make sure that interviewers in Bulgaria are screening the exact same way as those in San Francisco, as those in Bangalore. And there has to be mechanisms around learning and development in the background, making sure that is the case. You also have to have interviewer culture. If you're going to do this, everybody's going to participate. Interviewer culture has to be present. People are going to have to know that this is part of their core job. Even if their team doesn't have any hiring to do this year, they're going to have 2 interviews every single week for the rest of the year. And that's, again, a pretty unusual thing for a manager to say, wow, I don't have to grow at all, yet my team's going to dedicate 2 hours a week to interviews. That's a bit odd. But if you have all these things, if you have all these characteristics, then you can do some really cool things around speed and efficiency. You can say, all right, I need to hire 100 back-end engineers. Great. Well, guess what? I know the requirements are the same for all of them. So my sourcing team can just broadly go out and find the same profile over and over again. And they get super calibrated. They find all these people. They bring them into the funnel. Great. Interview process begins. Do I need to go and get the hiring manager to screen these people? No. I can choose any of my engineers to run an initial screen. And then when they pass that, I can move them to a panel. And I can have any of my engineers run that panel. And then when we get to the point where we said this person passes the bar for Uber, we can slot them into whatever opening makes the most sense. Whether there's a team that desperately needs that engineer to start soon. All right, good, priority there. Or maybe there's a team that has an underrepresented population, and we have a person who's passed the interview process from that population. Slot them into that team. And the hiring manager that's receiving these people from the process, they might not even been part of the interview process. And, I'm a manager myself, and I try to challenge myself a bit to say, if there was a tech recruiter interviewed in North America that I never met before, would I be comfortable just taking them right into my team? I'll be honest, it makes me a little bit nervous. But that's what I'm asking my business to do every single day for the sake of efficiency and for the sake of speed.
Yeah, super interesting, because I was thinking the exact same question here. Like, if I would be hiring people to my own team, like, would I be willing to take someone I've never met? And then another way around, if I would be the tech recruiter in the US that you just hired, like, would I like to join your team without meeting you?
Yeah, well,
most likely not, because like I personally think like I would love to see my manager before making the decision.
Well, this, of course, you can imagine this happens, right? So let's role play this out. So like I'm the recruiter and you're the hiring manager. I send you this CV and say, hey, great news. Candidate X has passed the interview process. And here's the information on how they did. You are going to hire this person. The first thing you probably ask is, well, I want to talk to him, right? That's what they all say. They all say, well, I'd like to interview this person, right? And so we have to push back and say, well, tell us why that is. What are you going to find out in 30 minutes with this candidate that our 6 interview panelists did not? And they generally, that's the end of the conversation. They say, "Oh, that's a good point. I don't really know. It looks like you've covered everything." Like, we have really rigorous feedback. We have that all documented. We have the CV. We give that to the manager and say, "This is all you need to make a decision. And if you want to pass on this person and go and wait for the next one, that's fine. But you're gonna have to wait." But you bring up a good point on the candidate side, and I wouldn't want to do that either. I wouldn't want to show up and never have met my manager. So what we do is, after we make this kind of pairing and we say, all right, we have an opening, we have this person, manager agrees, then we're going to set up a cell call with that manager and probably another cell call with a senior engineer on the team. That way the candidate has the context. They have the ability to understand exactly what they're going to be working on, and they agree to the vision. And if they say, you know what, this team really isn't for me, totally fine. We've got another 15 openings, and guess what? You've already passed the bar for all of them. So let's take you to the next one. And that's the beauty of like a unified central process, is that there's total interchangeability at the end of the funnel. If there's not a perfect match, we just move to the next one. We're hiring at scale. We're hiring for consistency, and it just makes for smooth recruiting.
Yeah. How about, I'm thinking now that in order to do that one, as you mentioned, you need to have super kind of structured way of running the recruitment process, the interviews and so forth. Like, do you believe that kind of a people or person is needed there? Like, could a robot be asking those questions? Like if it's super structured, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. So you're saying I'm preaching consistency, and all the way to the far side of consistency is formulaic AI interview of some sort.
Yeah.
It's a provocative question. But I maybe I would have said no until a few months ago, and I saw ChatGPT and just blew my brain just like it did everybody else. And now I'm questioning my purpose in life and whether I'm going to be taken over by our AI overlords. But I'm going to maintain my position and say that there's still some human nuance there into how you manipulate and move a conversation in an interview and process the data of this person replied in this way, and this means that they showed this competency, which we care about. I think that's a difficult thing to simulate. So I'm going to say that yes, the human interaction is still necessary there, but even if it wasn't, if we said whatever, there is a magical coding assessment that can actually predict perfectly the hires, do you think a candidate would want that experience? Or do you think that meeting them is valuable? Meeting people from the team is valuable throughout this?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And a good question is also like, will ChatGPT handle all the coding in the end that we don't need anyone in the team?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do believe that like people still want to meet people, and well, as we discussed, like I would love to meet the hiring manager or the person I would be joining a team and so forth. But at the same time, it's interesting because I think it was like already a few years ago when kind of Google released their kind of AI, for example. And I remember that there was this example where you could ask your kind of personal AI to call a haircut time for you, and then the AI did the call, and then on the other end there was another AI. So actually, it will be interesting that actually eventually, like, will we end up in a situation where AI is handling the recruiting from a company's perspective, and that AI is basically the main goal is to validate the candidate, sell the company, and then every job seeker have their kind of own AI filtered with all the information they need. Like, hey, okay, here's the info about me, sell me, but hey, here's the info I need to know about the company, so I know if I want to join the company or not. So I think it's interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm kind of like debating my own demise here, right? Like, if this works out like this, then us recruiters are probably going to have to find another way to provide value, because I mean, it's really powerful stuff out there, and it's going to change definitely in the next couple of years in how we operate. But I'm excited to be kind of on the front lines watching it happen.
Yeah, and same here. Like being a recruitment agency owner, like I believe it will kind of supercharge everything we do. We can do things more efficiently, but for sure, there's still place for people in that equation as well. And that's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully, you got a lot of good ideas about SaaS talent acquisition. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to share it on your social so others can hear it too. And if you have a topic in mind that you would like me to cover in this podcast, share it with me as well. I'm Samuli, CEO and co-founder in TalentBee, where we help fast-growing SaaS companies in their talent acquisition. Make sure to follow us, make sure to follow this podcast, and have an awesome week. Bye-bye.